Sean, what is the DNA of the Marvel Superheroes game? Was it derived from other TSR product projects? And then there's more here. Okay, well let's look at this. Let's look at this carefully. In the early 80s, and I believe, oh geez, I used to know the name, but there was one of the Gygax clan who was doing bang up work, great work when it came to outreach into other media. This person was responsible for the cartoon of that era. This person also got the license with, at the time, Cadence Industries, which known to many of the rest of you as in its trademark activity of Marvel Comics, Marvel Comics Group at the time. Well, anyway, so that license was acquired, and so there were little toys coming out, right? And we've talked about that. Some of the supplements that were coming out had NPCs, and you could buy the action figure of the NPCs, like that half-orc dude. Jealous of that. I know who you are. You own it. Okay, I'm over it. So, anyways, though, we get this role-playing game, just Poof, by Jeff Grubb. Now, I really ought to go back and see about Jeff Grubb's backstory prior to 1984. Considering the game, it would be deeply surprising if it hadn't been worked on for at least a couple of years before publication. There did have to get some original art done for the game. It wasn't all just proprietary transported art. In fact, a lot of it was done for the game itself by Marvel artists. So therefore, there was some work went into this. So I would even backdate it maybe to I'm guessing, right? 1980, 81, early in this process of getting D&D licensed and out there. Well, whatever Grubb's backstory, clearly, I mean, he could not have had more experience in role playing than the calendar permits. We're talking about only a few years. I will say that 1974 through 1980, 81-ish, 82-ish, we've talked about this a lot, was this cornucopia of applied design and creative innovations. Just the sky's the limit. How the hell do we do this? Amazing. And the telescoping, the why would that be telescoping? I mean, that's the word, but I mean, why not microscoping of the range and the diversity of design and play occurred in the mid-late 80s. But before that, and the extent to which all that amazing work was lost culturally is just tragic. Jeff Grubb must have been in on that, and because in the answer to what is the DNA of that Marvel Superheroes game, and I think we all know what we're talking about here. We're talking about, well, geez, it's a bunch of stuff, right? You could point to the chart on the back, which is brilliant, and uses a concept of success, which is found in, I think, no other role-playing games. And the gradation, right, of the attributes, which looks like somebody just made it up because, it was funny or something. And at this point, the approach of, okay, this is the hero, and now you play the hero and you don't have to make up a character, which has been a piece of superhero licensed games for a long time. Well, unfortunately, that gets subverted into a very negative form with the next round of publications and supplements. So when anybody says, "Oh, I love the Marvel Superheroes game. I play the deluxe form using these supplements," I'm like, I'm sure that's great, but call me a purist in this case. I'm not always this way, but in this case, I'm like, first is best to do it that way. But anyway, you have this amazing thing whereby even what looks like a tossed off and rather unconstructed, randomize everything, character creation, very optional in the back, generates brilliant characters. I mean, absolutely delightful characters. You roll it and you're like, oh God, terrible roll. Oh, terrible. This character sucks. And halfway through, you're going, on it. I got it. I'm playing this superhero. So, so many great things about it. The karma and the popularity mechanics. We could quibble about this and that. A bunch of people have been playing the game continuously all these decades, but a lot of people had added to play in the last few years, which is great. But you can quibble about things. You run into something, you're like, the way it's phrased, and I'm not going to follow that phrasing where you say, well, should I use these magic rules or those magic rules? I have my preference. Um, all of these things can be quibbled about, but I find that very much in the comfortable range of table quibbling and how we're going to do it from now on that you find with any game and is a good thing. Um, so, not claiming, perfection because we're talking, I mean, an instrument can't be perfect by definition. If perfection means that you get lovely reproducible results no matter who does it, well, then it's not an instrument anymore. So, okay, going down a rabbit hole. What I'm really trying to get at is that I don't know where each of these components came from. I can point to them in champions. Oh, look, there's Star Frontiers. Oh, look, there's Melee. Oh, look, there's Villains and Vigilantes. And oh, look, there's Superhero 2044. I mean, Champions is very much a stitched together set of parts from all these other games. Marvel Superheroes, you're like, well, you're rolling percentile dice, but it is nothing like BRP. You've got these attributes, but they are nothing like the standard six, no matter how many you break them into. You could have 22 attributes that are just, subsets of the standard six, or you could have 3 attributes which are collapsing of the standard six, whatever. No, this is a whole different thing. Now, what am I missing? What game did it maybe come from, or games, were parts taken from, or whatever? I haven't seen it. And I'm not an expert on all the role playing games of the 70s. I've tried, but I still have a long way to go. Even though I think I'm better oriented and have played more of them than many people, there's a lot of them, and some of them are freaking rare. So anyway, I would love to know if there are identifiable origin points for pieces and parts of Marvel superheroes, because it came together in ways that are just fantastic. Wasting more time here just to repeat a point from the past. Everybody I knew looked at that game in 1984 and said, silly kids game. I don't know, maybe there was a review that said that. There were very few role playing reviewers at that time, and okay, it's been a long time and this is uncharitable, but they all seem like assholes to me. And when I look back on their reviews and their little pontificatory statements and all the rest of it, and you're like, what the fuck do you know? And maybe it got hammered in some review and everybody just repeated that, because I hear exactly the same thing, exactly the same phrasing over and over and over through the decades. Oh, it looked like a silly little kids game. And you're kind of like, it's arguably pound for pound in, the top single digit group of your choice. It's really good. So someone talk to Jeff Grubb, right? Somebody go get him. If you have if you know him, if you know somebody who knows him, or whatever, or have access in some way, I mean, go find Jeff Grubb and ask for God's sake, because I'd like to know too. Sean continues, I have a half-formed questions about early TSR games like Boot Hill and Metamorphosis Alpha and what they contributed to the early conversation around RPGs, if anything. Um, which is also very good. Now, I actually had Boot Hill, or maybe I borrowed it from someone for a long time. I didn't have Metamorphosis Alpha, but I know a bunch of people were bonkers about it. So, as I recall, Boot Hill was quite different and used a really different, did it maybe even use percentile um, no, resolution? Been a while since I've thought about it. But as I recall, it simply wasn't the same system. There wasn't a house system. They were putting out different games. And the the idea of what they contributed to the early conversation, it's kind of fascinating. What did contribute to that early conversation? Well, clearly the extreme focus on Dungeons and Dragons, particularly in things like alarms and excursions, if not exclusively there, and the immediate pickup, the immediate attention onto RuneQuest when it kicked in hard, and of course it had been backstopped or set up for already in the board games. So Glorantha as a thing was a big deal too already. Otherwise, and of course Traveler, those are the ones that I can think of as having the biggest conversational input, but I'm guessing because conversations can be lost too. In fact, they often are. So was there an amazing discourse about Boot Hill or whatever? Maybe some of the other games, some of the things that we forget about. The minor ones, if you will, if that's the right word, the conversations that did begin then and have persisted in kind of a somewhat minority form, but strong along the whole way, would be Tunnels and Trolls, and of course anything to do with Tecumseh, starting with Empire of the Petal Throne. So what about other conversations? Were there conversations about Dave Arneson's adventures in fantasy? Were there conversations about the other early TSR games? Did those really just appear and disappear? Did they have impacts that we don't know about? Do we look at one of these and go, oh, so that's what Jeff Grubb was looking at. Look what he did with that idea. I don't know. I mean, and not even just for that one purpose of looking at Marvel superheroes. I'm just thinking about any impact on anybody in any way. Can't be the only scholar here. And remember, I just talked about those academics and what they have learned. Guys, cough it up. Look it up and cough it up, please. We need to know this stuff.